Hi, my name is Carl, and I have a rather odd tale to share. 9 months ago, my wife Tabitha came and told me she was pregnant. At first, I was surprised as I thought that we were being very careful. We had talked about having kids one day, but we had wanted to wait until both of us were in better financial situations. We had just graduated from university and hadn't started our careers yet. Instead, we were working part-time jobs and were living with my parents. My parents had a large home and gave us the whole basement. It was more than most people had at our age, and we greatly appreciated it. You see, my parents had worked hard for their money and had become quite wealthy, and I hoped to one day do the same. But once my wife told me about her pregnancy, I began to worry it was no longer possible. At any rate, there was no going back, and so I tried my best to get on board. And I found that once I accepted that we were going to be parents, that I began to get excited about being a dad. My wife began buying some rather expensive things, such as designer diaper bags or strollers that cost a month's salary. I had always known that things for the baby would be expensive, but it felt that my wife was going a bit overboard with what she was buying. Hey honey, I know we want only the best things for the baby, but don't you think you're spending too much money?
No, Carl, I don't. Don't you want our baby to be happy?
Of course I do. Yes, but maybe we could look for better deals on some of this stuff. Neither of us are making a lot of money.
Stop being such a cheapskate, Carl. Our baby will need a lot of things. If you're that worried about money, then maybe you should get a second job.
Unfortunately, the closer to the due date, the more often we would have such arguments. And after the second time that we fought, I decided to get another job. I began doing a few hours extra every week, but I decided that I needed to keep it secret. You see, my wife is a wonderful person, but the one thing that I know about her is that if she sees a lot of money in the bank account, then she is more likely to spend it. But if we kept a smaller balance in there, then she would spend less. And so, the extra money that I made, I put into a private account, and then I had my brother invest it for me. I figured that even though it wasn't a lot of money, that maybe if properly invested, then maybe it could grow. While I was growing excited about us becoming a family, I was beginning to feel burnt out. Between working 2 jobs and all of our appointments, I was losing steam. If Tabitha noticed, she didn't say anything. It almost felt as if she was amping up how much she was spending. Suddenly, it wasn't just baby things, but jewelry and clothes. Had they been maternity clothes, then I would have understood a bit, but it was outfits that she swore were for after she gave birth. Seeing this, I began to increase how much money that I sent to my secret account in an attempt to shelter our savings. I tried to talk to my father about it. Hey Dad, can we talk? Of course, Carl, what's up? Well, I'm just worried about how much money Tabitha is spending. I tried to talk to her about it, but it just keeps turning into a fight. Haha, yeah, it can be a very stressful time. Unfortunately, her hormones are all over the place. Trust me though, once the baby is born, she'll get back to her old self. Just give it some time. I knew that he was right, but it was hard to be patient when we still had another months to go, and she was spending money on things that we didn't need. Our apartment began filling up with boxes of things that she was buying. I just kept reminding myself, though, that this was only temporary, and that the woman I used to know would return to me after our child was born. It was around that time, though, that I noticed something odd. Both the house phone and my wife's cell phone began getting a lot of prank calls. I could tell that these were upsetting my wife, as she would get very frustrated every time they happened, which I could understand, since when I answered them, they would hang up. We tried to trace the calls, but they were coming from burner phones, so we could never figure out who was harassing us. A large part of me worried that this extra stress couldn't be good for my wife and the baby, but when I called the police and told them about it, they told us that there wasn't much that they could do and that we should just change our numbers, which my wife refused to do. At any rate, the day finally came and we went to the hospital. I felt so bad for my wife, as it took a long time for her to deliver the baby. After many hours, a nurse came out and told me that my wife had delivered the baby and that she was resting, but if I wanted to see the baby, that they had wheeled him into the nursery. I didn't want to disturb my wife, and so I went to the nursery to see my son. I couldn't believe that I had a son. The thought of us being a family made me so incredibly happy, and so I rushed over to the nursery to have a look at him. However, there was only one baby in the nursery, and I knew that there wasn't a chance that he was my son. He was very cute, but he was black, and both my wife and I were white. Looking around the room, I saw another man standing around looking through the glass at the nursery, and I assumed that the baby inside belonged to him. So I turned to the nurse nearby and asked, "Excuse me, but I was told that my son is in there, but I don't see him. My name is Carl Green, and my wife's name is Tabitha."
Yes. That boy there is the baby that was just delivered to Tabitha Green.
That can't be. That doesn't make sense. Did you say that that is Tabitha Green's baby there?
Yes.
The other man came over at the mention of my wife's name. As it turned out, the black man's name was Marshall, and he began to apologize to me profusely as he admitted that he had been having an affair with my wife for over a year and that he suspected that the baby was his. He even admitted to calling us, and upon hearing my voice hanging up, my heart dropped and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Turning to the nurse, I told her that I wanted a paternity test done right away. Luckily, Marshall agreed to provide a sample as well. And while my wife rested, we determined that Marshall was indeed the boy's father. Marshall, to his credit, hadn't known that Tabitha was married when he started dating her, and when she had gotten pregnant and stopped talking to him. He had assumed that she had just started dating me, and since he didn't want to ruin our relationship, that was why he had always hung up when he called. Since he wasn't well off, he had just assumed that she dumped him because he was poor, and when he found out that I came from a wealthy family, it just made sense to him. I was angry, but I knew that I couldn't take it out on Marshall. After all, he was also a victim. Instead, I called my parents and told them to gather up all of Tabitha's belongings and to move them to a storage container. They were, of course, confused by my request, but once I told them the reasons why, they completely understood. I then called up my lawyer and asked her to file for divorce. Once my parents were done, they came to the hospital with the key and gave it to me. I could tell that they were livid, but I tried to calm them down by telling them that I was handling the situation. Taking deep breaths, I then went to wake my wife up. "Hey, hun. Sorry to wake you, but I need to say something."
Carl, are you stupid? I just gave birth. Why are you waking me? I need rest.
"I just wanted to give you this key and to tell you that no, you didn't deliver our baby. You delivered Marshall's baby. I know the whole truth. As for that key, it goes to a storage container where all your stuff is. In other words, I'm kicking you out. My lawyer will contact you." And with that, I left. Months later, our lawyers went to court to argue our cases with one another in front of a judge. Upon hearing everything that happened and how long my wife's affair had gone on for, he chose to let her keep the little money that was left in the joint bank account, but that the rest of our assets would be kept separately. The fact that we didn't own my parents' basement meant that she had no claim to it, so I was at least able to keep the place where I lived. And since she had no idea about my secret accounts, I was able to hold on to them as well. In the end, we were divorced, and we each walked away with what we had first entered the relationship with. Although everything that was in the apartment, the judge decided belonged to me, including all the jewelry, baby stuff, and clothes that she had. Even though I was now free, I couldn't just let things go like that, though. No, I felt wronged, and I wanted to get revenge on her for not only cheating on me, but also for using me for my parents' money. And so I contacted Marshall and asked if I helped him, if he would go after getting sole custody of his son. Confused, he agreed, and so I took some of the money that I had secretly set aside and paid for his legal fees so that he could hire a good lawyer. My brother is a genius when it comes to finances, and he took every dollar that I had given him and turned it into a small fortune. In addition, I gave Marshall all the baby stuff that Tabitha had originally purchased, and when he went to court, the judge saw that not only was he better equipped to raise the child, but also that Tabitha was unstable, considering how she had tried to make another man raise Marshall's son. He was granted sole custody, and the look of elation on his face made me so happy. I'm not really sure what became of Tabitha after that, although I've heard that she is still working a part-time job and is struggling to make ends meet. As for me, I took the remainder of the money that my brother invested and put it down as a substantial down payment on a house. Soon afterwards, I found a full-time job and started to date again. So far, I haven't found anyone, but I'm hopeful. And in an odd turn of events, I've even become best friends with Marshall, and his son treats me like an uncle. So I guess in an odd way, it all worked out. Thanks for watching. Please like the video so it can be recommended to others to watch.